Spartans, welcome back. It's your boy Leonidas here with a brand new chess series. In today's video, we start the series called Worldwide Chess, where we go into a specific country and talk about the players that put chess on the map in their region. In today's video, we talk about none other than the world superpower of November 29th, 2023, India. We're going to go back in history, talk about the best players from eras and times past, some honorable mentions, some legends of Indian chess, our International Master Sakar, International Master Murugan, International Master Koshi, and Grandmasters Thipse and Grandmaster Barua. But for today's video, we're only going to be looking at four people, four titans, four horsemen of the apocalypse. In history, we talk about Sultan Khan. We'll then move into Manuel Aaron, International Master Manuel Aaron, the first international master in Indian history. We'll then move into the one and only staple of Indian chess, the forefather of all these great grandmasters that we have today, Viswanathan. And then finally, our fourth horseman of the apocalypse. You'll have to find out as we get into the video because it's going to surprise you, because there's a lot of good young grandmasters to choose from, but I have my personal favorite. But without further ado, hold the line until next time. Peace. To begin the story of Indian chess, we have to go back to 600 AD to the Gupta Empire, where it was known as, I can't remember exactly what it's known, is it Chaturangji? But then it moved to Persia, and then it was known as Shatranj. Forgive me guys if I butchered that, because I'm American, I only know one language. But then after that, it moved to Europe, and then it went to worldwide. But since the birth of chess in India, there's not really very many well-documented players, games, or really anything that I could find on the internet. So if you are an Indian history buff, let me know in the comments, because I want to know more about how this game came about and the history behind it in India. So we kind of have to fast forward to the 1900s to get any sort of moving and momentum forward for Indian chess. And we begin with Sultan Khan. Mr. Khan, who should now be pronounced GM Khan, in my opinion. He should get posthumously awarded that GM for how deadly he was in the middle game and the amount of quality players he beat, such as Jose Raul Capablanca, which we're going to be looking at now. The game begins with a very solid knight to f3 followed by knight to f6, and they culminate in 9 moves of theory. This is a Queen's Indian defense Kasparov variation, made famous by Garry Kasparov, one of the top 2 players of all time. I'll let you guys duke it out in the comments of who you think the best player of all time is. Is it those two between Magnus Carlsen and Garry Kasparov, or is it somebody else? Do you have a dark horse? Is it Bobby Fischer? Is it Mikhail Tal? Is it me? It's not me, by the way. It will never be me. But the game culminates with bishop to d3, and now black has a decision to make. They make that decision very quickly. They put the knight onto e4, telling him he's about that business. Capablanca is about that business. There ain't no way this man Mir Khan is gonna come into my house and try to checkmate me. He's not doing that. But Khan says, yes I am. He moves his bishop back, kind of like a Jobava-esque style setup. Pawn to e4. Bro, I cannot speak. Pawn to d4, bishop out to f4. Instead of the knight being on d2, it's on c3. And now black makes another good move here. It is knight developing to d7, almost connecting the rooks. And now white makes his next plan of attack very clear. He puts his queen to c2, and you can see by all these arrows that I forgot to get rid of that white's plan of attack is very simple. He wants to go for this pawn right here. He wants to pawn storm. He wants to get rid of this knight. He wants to castle. He wants to connect his rooks on the G and H files, reinforcing these pawns as they storm through. And he wants to knock on the door and say, Capablanca, daddy's home. Capablanca has to do something about that right away, and what he does is he reinforces that knight on e4 with a pawn move to f5, and now Capablanca moves his knight to b5. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where, if you've ever played tug of war, 2 players or 2 teams are tugging on the rope, and one team starts to get tired, they start to lose their grip a little bit, and they start to get a little bit of rope burn. That's what happens with this move that Capablanca makes with bishop to d6. He starts to lose his grip a little bit of the game. He loses his grip because after the knight takes, it doubles a pawn, and it doesn't force. It allows Khan to start his pawn push. And the next sequence of events is a very telltale sign of how Khan was so good at chess. Mir Khan was an ultimate tactician of the middle games. He calculated that after knight takes, bishop slides back, he can begin his pawn storm, and Capablanca is going to start his counterattack, and he's going to give up his queen for 2 rooks. I don't know if I could do that, guys. I love my queen, and there's very few times that I would ever give up a queen for 2 rooks, but he does. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to see the vice grip that Mir Khan puts on Capablanca, one of the top 10 players potentially of all time. Watch how he effortlessly demolishes Capablanca in this middle game, squeezing the position, making ever so subtle improving moves here. You'll see there's some feedback here, but ain't nobody care about that. This is still some very high level chess here. Ever so subtle moves, ever so subtle repositioning of the pieces. Khan is making the correct moves. He's pushing these pawns forward. You see the queen is about the only thing that has been moved. And these pieces are ready to come alive at any moment. If this bishop moves, if this knight ever gets out of the way, these pawns are sure to fall. And remember, this bishop is also guarding something as well besides this pawn. That'll come back in the later game. But here comes Khan, continuously developing and improving moves of his position, slowly and subtly moving his pawns forward, ever so slightly creeping into Capablanca's area. And here comes White. White is about to knock on the door. Black says, no, you're not. He shuts it down. But you'll notice Capablanca has moved his queen about 80% of the time in the last 5 or 6 or 7 different moves. But White is slowly but surely moving every piece perfectly. And ladies and gentlemen, Capablanca lost the game with that bishop move to c8. It's not about sacrificing the rook. It's about what did that bishop protect. It used to protect this pawn way back when it was on a6, but it also protected this c6 square. And White plants that rook on c6 and says, game over. The doors have been shut. You will not pass. You shall not pass. Because after a couple of moves here, White gives up a pawn. Khan had calculated after that pawn gets taken, he slides his king out of the way, connecting the rooks. And he can take this pawn and slowly but surely walk this b pawn up the board. And there's nothing that Capablanca can do. He's trying to fight back. And ladies and gentlemen, that check by Khan is such pure genius. It's the only way that allows this pawn to promote, because it is the most forcing move. A check is the most forcing move because it forces you to attack the piece or move the piece or move out of the way or do something about the check. You can't worry about anything else on the board besides what is checking you. And Black takes. White promotes to a queen. Black loses their knight. And Capablanca resigns. Capablanca resigns after a sensational game by Mir Khan. Let's move on to the next one. Ladies and gentlemen, this second game comes to you courtesy of Manuel Aaron. International Master Aaron faced off against Lajos Portisch, the former number 2 in the world, and a peak FIDE rating of 2635. So there's about 3 to 250 FIDE point difference between these two players when they met on the 64 squares. Manuel Aaron walked so Viswanathan could run. This game begins with a King's Indian defense. Both players do the standard castling of kingside, and they continue to develop in a closed position. But you'll notice in this position, White is slightly ahead on the eval bar. It's already to a 1.0 on the eval bar in their favor because of the fact that White has a dominant center here with these 3 pawns. These knights are looking juicy. This bishop is about to be opened up, and Black is a little bit passive with this bishop. This knight's really not doing much, and this is probably Black's strongest piece. And White continues to make the correct moves, continues to keep the advantage. They're shuffling pieces. This is a very tense position, but all of a sudden it explodes down the center. We have an opening on the D file, rerouting of the pieces, taking of a pawn, and we come to this moment right here where they take the bishop on E5, and this bishop is going to come back to bite White in the booty. Right in the booty. The bishop slides back. Knight jumps to G3. And ladies and gentlemen, this wouldn't be in the video unless something crazy happened. And crazy something happened did. Ladies and gentlemen, the only move that White can do is rook to G1 to keep the game in his favor. The reason that does that is because they will win this knight. They'll win this knight because if the knight jumps back, here comes the bishop. And if you take, now we have these rooks staring at each other. But white does not do that. Instead of rook to g1, white instead takes with the king and loses the game immediately because pawn to g5. Such a subtle move, but such a brilliant move at the same time. It's obviously not a brilliant move by chess.com, but it's a brilliant move because white cannot take because they're pinned. And if white can't take, black is going to be like, thank you. Black takes, opens up the king for an attack. And here comes the queen. Ladies and gentlemen, what is Gotham chess famous for? Sacrificing the rook. Manuel Aaron sacrifices the rook, gives up a full rook for a bishop and a pawn, because now the queen comes in, king has to slide back, you give a check, king slides over, you put an outpost, and white resigns. Portisch resigns because it's pretty much made on the board. The only move that keeps it from being made on the board is giving up your bishop. This rook is going to come through. The king is cut off. King cannot move anywhere. And it is a GG. Manuel Aaron, a very formidable opponent. And I'm sure if he had colleagues and he had peers, he would surely have been a grandmaster. That's our second game. Let's move on to the third. The next horseman of the apocalypse is none other than Viswanathan Anand, the 5-time world champion, the man who pulled it from Garry Kasparov and only relinquished it to the greatest of all time, Magnus Carlsen, the forefather of all the great grandmasters that we have today. This game was played in 2016 in the Singfield Cup against MVL, who at the time was a 28-19, a super GM. The game begins with a Carl Khan 2 knights attack, and this pawn to e5 by white was something that Bobby Fischer used very often in his early days of chess. As he added more to his repertoire, he didn't. The point is, you want to make it uncomfortable. You want to put tempo on this knight. The knight jumps into e4, and then Vichy threatens mate 1, which some of us would hang. Don't you lie to me. I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at me because I can see my reflection in the camera. Some of us would develop kicking this knight out and also trying to develop this dark square bishop, and we would hang mate 1. Some of us would do that. Some of us would do that. But these guys are 2800s. They're not going to do that at this moment. But instead of that, white shuts down the position, says, you're not going to be taking anything on my watch. You're not going to be threatening mate 1. In fact, I'm going to be putting pressure on your position because now we have an isolated h-pawn. And then a few moves later, we have doubled e-pawns. And this is a very awkward position. White doesn't have very many pieces developed. Honestly, they've only moved this knight out of the position. But look at all these different avenues of approach for MVL to try to work with. These dark squares, this light squares, everything here is open and ready for MVL to attack. Black has really no quick way of castling either. They're not going to be able to go here because they're going to get their knight taken. They're going to get doubled up on the H file or the A file. What's going to happen? Well, Vichy decides to put his knight on the rim, and then he gives up a check. And all of a sudden, this game starts to get a little bit out of hand. A boa constrictor-like pressure gets applied to Vichy's position. The bishop comes in, the pawn comes in, the knight comes in, rooks get moved. But MVL is slowly but surely improving his position and improving his advantage on the eval bar. This catapults him all the way up to a 1.3 on the eval bar. You can see it's getting crowded. It's getting it's getting crazy out here. You have 2 bishops that are blocked in by this pawn, this pawn. These are 2 big pawns. That's what this is. This pawn is a very strong pawn because it could often be reinforced here in the future. It's also reinforced by this knight and this rook, so you don't even need to move a pawn in front of your king, which probably is not a good idea. Here comes MVL. Take. Knight jumps in. Bro, what's going on? Threatening the queen. Queen slides over. Here comes the pawn. This bishop is trapped, so it has to take. No, it doesn't have to take. The reason it doesn't have to take is danger levels. What's worth more than a bishop? A queen. But they don't trade. Remember, when you're on the attack, you don't want to trade your pieces. Bro, the suffocation has begun. Attacking the queen. Ladies and gentlemen, in this position, Viswanathan shows off his calculating prowess. The reason that he's the greatest Indian chess player of all time, the reason that he's a world champion or former world champion, the reason that he's still performing at such a high level today, MVL calculates, takes, and takes. And MVL is up a pawn or up a piece of material. But what happens when you throw in a little zest? What happens if you throw in a little extra move? Another move that wasn't seen, a blindside hook. That's exactly what happens in this position. After the knight jumps in, Fishy takes, white takes, but instead of taking back, he pushes pawn to e2. This does two things. First thing that it does is if you do not take this pawn, say you avoid, I'm forking your rooks, I'm promoting to a queen with a check, I'm keeping the tempo, game over. So he takes. And when he takes, now he can take, and now Anand is up a piece of material. MVL tries to strike back, but ladies and gentlemen, there's 6 pawns on the board for white, for a bishop, but these 3 pawns right here are weak sauce. This bishop is about to come alive, or this rook is about to come alive. Something's going to eat these pawns up, and that's exactly what happens. The rook comes off the board, rook takes, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a slow march of death. MVL cannot do anything. The rook comes over, takes, and that's all she wrote. Gives a check. Now you're guarding this forever, and in this position, after the pawn pushes, they resign. MVL resigns because you can't take 2 birds with 1 stone when you don't have any stones to throw. Let's move on and reveal the 4th horseman of the Indian chess apocalypse. Ladies and gentlemen, the 4th horseman of the apocalypse, in my opinion, is none other than Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa. There is one reason and one reason only that I think that he has a chance to be the next world champion from India. And that reason is his sister. The fact of the matter is that his sister probably will be another world champion on the women's side. They might even be simultaneous world champions. But they're going to be there to support each other, to play with each other, to study together, to push each other to new heights. And Pragg has shown an uncanny ability to never get rattled in a game. He played Magnus Carlsen when he was just a wee lad and whooped him. Out of all the grandmasters from India right now, I believe he has the best shot to cement himself as one of the greatest Indian chess players of all time. Let's get into the game. The game begins with the Gucci piano. Gucci piano is a very close position, a very tactical position, a place that you have to be very careful where you put your pieces because they could get trapped very easily by these pawn pushes. White is already seeing their plan come to fruition with trying to push on the queen side, but the bishops come off the board very quickly. Both players are against and they hate the bishops. They want to be an equestrian. They want to be known as the horse boys and horse girls in high school. This game doesn't have a lot of fireworks. A lot of pieces come off the board, but what it does show is Pragg's ability to squeeze a victory out of the clutches of a draw, because this is very drawish for most of the game, guys. Very, very drawish. And you can see they're rerouting pieces, they're pushing forward, they're trying to create some sort of imbalance, but this is such a balanced position. But Liren makes the first move. Liren is the first man to blink in the face of danger. Liren undermines his position because now the knight can jump in. It is stuck in the center. It is patrolling the center. The pawn pushes forward. And ladies and gentlemen, the rooks come off the board. The knight jumps in, and the knight has free reign. The knight has rerouted in the last 4 moves. It's gone boom, boom, bang, bang. And this knight is the difference maker. This knight comes in, comes out, always threatening positions. Can never take your eye off the knight. Knight gets planted, and it is all over because we are about to feast. Liren is trying his best to keep as many pieces on the board, but the pawns are falling. And ladies and gentlemen, there is one pawn, and that pawn is the passer on the H-file that will get to the end. It will promote to a queen. Liren is doing a phenomenal job defending down a pawn, and soon to be down 2 pieces, or 2 pawns, and you cannot stop this pawn. You have to be accurate, as Pragg is being, but this pawn will continue to push as long as the pieces stay coordinated. The knight comes in, the rook comes in to give a check, the rook gives another check, the rook is soon to go to the second file, or the second row up top, and it's all she wrote. It's slowly squeezing the position. This pawn is about to fall on the B file. You're going to be up 2 pawns, and in this position, Liren resigns. Liren resigns because this knight is about to jump in here. This rook is about to eat. Everything is about to fall, and you're going to have 2 passed pawns here, 1 passed pawn here, and you can't have 2 pieces cover 2 spots at the same time. And ladies and gentlemen, I am excited for Pragg's future. I'm excited to see what he has in store for us. He has an outside shot at being the world champion challenger this year of 2024. I don't think he's going to be able to do it this year. I think he's a couple years away from his absolute peak, but I'm excited to see what happens. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the 4 horsemen of the Indian chess apocalypse. You have Sultan Khan, the man who put chess on the map for India. You have Manuel, the first international master in Indian history. You have the 5-time world champion, the greatest Indian chess player of all time, Viswanathan, Anand. And you finally have my dark horse, the 4th horseman of the apocalypse, Rameshbabu, Praggnanandhaa. As always, hold the line until next time. Peace.